The fact that I was a drug addict and watching porn and just a general degenerate at 11 years old. And now I have 8 figures in client results and I've built 6 and 7 figure businesses and I've ran an Ironman and I don't do drugs. Like if I can remember my own story and I can remember my own plot line, theirs gets way quieter, right? Because now I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, no, I'm doing the thing. Like I just have to remind myself of my own progress, really.
Harrison, we connected as friends, but also because you have an expertise in something I don't, which is social media marketing and creating accounts in a way to create influence and a platform to create a movement or to monetize it correctly. I think it's something, there's so many content creators nowadays who are starting, but they have no idea what to do at all. And there's a fear in starting and creating something and failing and not knowing how to build a movement or a following. So it starts where I want. Let's start with, if you were a content creator, starting off nowadays, how would you start going about the process in the pursuit of eventually becoming a bigger name?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think there's 2 different places someone starts with, right? It's either they're creating content because they care about something, but they don't have a business, or they have a business, but they're not creating content, right? So there's really, in my opinion, 2 different places to start. Like you have expertise or a business of some format, and you don't know how to go about promoting that on the internet. And then the other camp is people that are just, they're building a following, they're creating an audience, but they don't know exactly what to do with it. And so for the content creating people that are like creating content, but they're, like, well, what do we actually do with this? How do I increase my brand awareness? How do I increase my audience engagement? And at the end of the day, pay the bills. And so for this community, I really like the train of thought around always begin with the end in mind. And so it's how can I build the strongest relationship with my audience and how can I provide the most value to my audience? And so like if, let's say you're a content creator that specifically is speaking into a lot of things around spirituality and personal development, well, okay, what can I do to actually support and help this audience? So maybe it's these people need a strong structure and journal. Maybe they need a good ritual or routine program to go through. Maybe these people need a mentor in their life or some kind of elements that actually support them in this space, or they need a community around them. So like local meetups, local communities, online communities, versus for the business owners, they already have an offer, right? It's like, let's say one of my clients is a non-operative orthopedic surgeon. So he helps people heal injuries, specifically like ligament, tendon, and muscle injuries without cutting them up, right? And so for him, he already has a business. And so his thing is, well, how do I establish expertise and authority on the internet and show people, hey, I've been in this game for 20 years, and how can that generate calls for my business? And so his thing is expanding his audience and establishing authority that then brings interest and volume into his actual business, versus these people over here. It's like, how can I just deepen my relationship, right? Because if you're already creating the content, like as long as you're not stupid and you listen to feedback and you're looking at your audience, excuse me for saying stupid, but as long as you're like actually engaging and listening to the feedback in your audience, your content will perform better and you'll build your audience over time. And then it's just, how do I provide more and more value? How can I cultivate that?
What does engaging and listening look like in a detailed way? Like what constitutes effective engagement with your audience?
That's a great question. And it's one of those intangibles, right? It's hard to qualify like brand loyalty and engagement. Obviously you have your leading metrics like likes, comments, saves, shares. Also story engagement is really key on social media platforms. Like how much is your content being shared across people and in a community, being saved? But then the thing on like Instagram and Snapchat is like, how much are people responding to polls? How engaged are people in answering questions or asking questions? What are your conversations with your audience like on social media, whether it's the DMs, whether it's through comments?
In your experience and all various clients you've helped, what are some tips and tricks that are universally working? Like little things or little kind of hooks or pieces of content or ways of engaging? What are some similarities across your clients are leading to large results that people can start to replicate?
Yeah, principles across everything. Everybody's overstimulated, so your hook matters more than anything else. Like you could have the ultimate, the most important and impactful mission or piece of content for someone to hear and digest, and if it doesn't have a good hook on it, they won't even listen. So principles on hooks, you have stats and statements. So a statistic or a statement about something like a belief. And then you have quotes and questions. So those are like the 4 strongest hooks that we found. Again, stats, statistics, quotes, and questions. And all 4 of these trigger something in your brain of, I need to pay attention to this, right? So it's like 4 out of 5 people find this, or like the dentist thing, right? 9 out of 10 dentists recommend this toothpaste. That's a statistic. It hooks you on some kind of information. It's good marketing, right? A quote would be like Abraham Lincoln once said, and then that, and then you unpack that, or you share your own perspective. I disagree with Abraham Lincoln when he said this, and that'll hook your brain. Same thing with statements like, I believe that, or this is something that, I find to be true, or whatever that is, your statement. And then your question is, if this is something you're experiencing, or like, if you've ever woken up with a bunch of brain fog and you immediately know you're going to have a bad day, here's what I do to course correct. That's a question, right? It's like, if you've ever woken up and they're like, wait, what's going on? Like, is that me? That could be a quote or a question or a statement. But so yeah, to go back to your question, principles would be, hooks matter more than anything else on platforms. The other things that are working really well is being authentic. And so obviously, like, people are super sick of fake content creators on the internet. Like, there is the tribe of thought of like doing stuff like Mr. Beast and being extreme works well. But you're competing on extremism, which to me is like a commodity. And the one thing that nobody can compete with you on is authenticity to who you are, and honesty and transparency in who you are. So I would say that the internet is definitely resonating more with that format of content. We see people like Sam Sulek and a bunch of other guys on the internet, like Ryan Trahan, where it's just them fully expressed on video, and people love that type of content.
How do you convey authenticity? Because it's something that I thought I was good at, but in your feedback, you told me, Lucas, who you are isn't coming across social media, which I was grateful for, and we're starting to shift now. But
yeah,
I think I'm an authentic person. How does that? Because it's a skill, right? It's a skill that's required in becoming authentic as a human being in reality. But then transferring that to social media is a whole different thing that I haven't mastered. So how does one go about that process, and how does one realize if they're being authentic or not on social media? Like, what are like the key requirements to have that assessment to say I am authentic on social media?
I think the keys for being authentic on social media while still having a content plan and understanding what you're doing is looking at, is this something I'm passionate about? Is this something I'm uncomfortable talking about? And is this something I would talk about off camera? Right. And so those are really the 3 that I see is, okay, like, is this something
uncomfortable?
Uncomfortable being like a life story or something that you would share with a friend, that you wouldn't necessarily like. It's one of those things. Like, yeah, it's like, oh, is this controversial? Should I really say this on camera? Being vulnerable. But also, like, look at Andrew Tate, right? He's saying things that would be really uncomfortable to say on the internet because he knows he's going to get hate for it. And so it's like saying the things that you would say if the cameras were turned off.
Yeah. Oh, makes sense. What I'm curious about in your perspective is do you have examples of someone like Andrew Tate or different influencers, you recognizing the path they took to success? Like, what are some what's like the average path one of the biggest influencers take nowadays to create a massive level influence or multi-level marketing? What are things like that what's the common strategy now to get influence?
That's a great question. And honestly, I don't think there's one straightforward answer. I think there's, all roads lead to Rome, right? And so there's many different paths to the same destination. Really, it's like you can be very controversial. You can have really high charisma. You can also have really high levels of expertise. Like Andrew Huberman is extremely dry, but he has a very high level of expertise, and so he's built an audience. Andrew Tate is extremely controversial, but I would argue he doesn't have a ton of expertise in any one specific thing. And then you have people I mentioned, Ryan Trahan, who has a ton of charisma, but he isn't necessarily an industry expert, and he's not necessarily controversial. And then you can also go to the extreme and literal just extremism, which would be more Mr. Beast tactic of, hey, I spent $5 million on this video. And you're like, well, I have to watch this now.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a bunch of different pathways. I'm a bigger proponent of the authenticity, like the charisma and more of an authentic approach on camera. I tend to lean away from like pandering to controversy or pandering to extremism.
You think it's possible to be authentically you if you're charming enough and get the momentum you need to build a following without being controversial?
I do think I think everything is necessary, right? It's everything in moderation, including moderation. So it's picking something that you can double down on, like charisma, and then also understanding that, if there's controversial elements to yourself, you shouldn't hold back from expressing those. Or if there's things that you want to experiment with in the extremes, you should, right? Even if people might give you flack for it.
Yeah. But one of the biggest skills.
Yeah,
I think
100%.
is being okay with negative feedback and not letting it affect you. Do you think that's a big skill for people nowadays? Is having like a strong spine when it comes to hearing negative feedback?
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's an essential way to be.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and especially on the internet, right? Like you have keyboard warriors, like you have people that I get DMs every day that are like, kill yourself and you're a piece of shit. And I've had clients that get death threats in the mail or people showing up at their house, like talking bad. And it's like, I just have to remind myself, like, if it's someone I trust and someone I love and I know that loves and respects me, I'm going to listen to that feedback. And if it isn't, I'm going to look at them and say, well, does this person have a life that I actually want to model after? Like, is this someone I would actually appreciate advice by? But a lot of it just comes to thick skin. You just got to be willing to, there's so many keyboard warriors out there.
Yeah, for sure. I want to close the authenticity conversation. I think it's an important one to touch upon is that, to summarize, is that for someone to convey authenticity on social media, it would involve fully speaking to what you think is what you believe in, what you want to say to.
Yes.
Not just saying things for the sake of controversy, for the sake of extremism.
Yes.
And then the last question I have is, what kind of content strategy would reward authenticity? Is it more so a IRL approach, walking around with like a DJI mic and just more like a Twitch streamer level of authenticity? Like, can you convey authenticity if you're doing like spamming of like formatted hook videos? Like, what's a content strategy to create a sense of authenticity?
Yeah, and again, I think it really matters on the individual and what their specific lifestyle and needs are. The big thing that I come to with like authenticity and creating content is this something I would do off camera too, right? And so is this something that I would like, is this a conversation that I want to have off camera? Is this an activity I'd want to do off camera? So like you may be more suited to having one-on-one, smaller, more intimate conversations that are long format, like a podcast. I love talking to people on the street. I love walking up to random people and asking questions and meeting new people. And so I know that would be a content format that is more authentic to who I am. But I don't think that in either case, you can't also be intentional about how you present a topic or a thought or an idea in a way that has a strong hook, right? So I think you can have both.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you have to sacrifice either or. But yeah.
That's a good answer. If you were to throw away morality and any negative effects of your own psyche, if you were to create an avatar of someone who would be a viral sensation over and over again, what would you make them do?
That's a very, very interesting question. I mean, there's two different trains of thought, right? I believe that the human psyche is a double-edged sword. And so we tend to pursue either morality or depravity, right? And so if I were to, right now I'm on a pursuit of working with impact-driven businesses, and everything that I do in my life is, in an intention of having an upward and positive trajectory and impact on the world. If I were to throw that away, which I don't think I would, even if I didn't have morals, because that's the long-term sustainable pathway to success, and how to continue and maintain success. But if I was thinking more short-sighted, get rich quick, I just want to do things, I would focus on depravity as much as possible. I would explore the darkest parts of the internet and the darkest parts of the inner psyche as possible.
Like what?
Well, I mean, this could be extreme challenges. This could be extreme violence. This could be like, to me, the whole OnlyFans industry and the whole online porn industry is a very, very deep level of depravity and people pursuing short-term success. And and it works, right? Like you have people like, what's her name? The Sky. There's some like LA girl. She was just dating one of the Nelk boys. And it's like, she's gone famous on the internet and she's built up this giant platform because she's willing to throw away her morals to pursue depravity and scratch that itch in the back of a man's brain.
Even deeper than just, I love this conversation, but it's even deeper than just OnlyFans. That's one example I agree with, right? To some extent, but it's like, there's more to that, right? I think of as like anyone who's just trying to go viral for viral's sake and scrapping who they are. That's the same. They also throw away their morals, right? So that's the delicate line that I struggle with personally, is how do you go about reaching your goals, if you have big goals of being, a big influencer, without throwing away your morals? It's a delicate line that I don't know the answer to. So let's try and explore that. How would you go about that? How do you go about that as someone who's also trying to build their own platform?
100%. I think that part of it is like the difference between challenging someone and enabling someone. And so there's a reality that everybody has pain and has experienced misery and difficulty and struggle. And everybody also is trying to not live in this state of existentialism and dread and sorrow and misery. And so you can enable and play to their misery, like Juice WRLD, right? Where it's just extremely depressing things, or you can challenge that train of thought and you can hopefully plant a seed of hope. And this will get you in the door, right? To enable someone or to say, hey, I know where you're at. I've been there myself. Like, I know what it's like to be in that situation. That can be a great way to open a conversation and disarm someone. You don't want to be a preacher, right? But if you're going to just sit in this camp of, oh, life is miserable and all of your sadness and woe is me is justified, like, yeah, you should just be miserable all the time. I think that's where you're leading to a negative impact on the world. And I think that conflicts with morality, right? I think that there's a part of morality that's like, I have a duty to help other people the same as, I want to treat others how you wish to be treated. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want the people around me to constantly enable me to just become a worse and worse individual.
Why did you choose to, I'm assuming, right, you have the capacity and knowledge to help non-impact driven creators make a lot of money, but you choose not to. That's an interesting and commendable choice for someone your age, who 23, if I remember, right?
Yes.
23. For a 23-year-old to have the knowledge you do and not go for not helping OnlyFans models, promote their content, or someone promote their like terrible merch, or someone just promote themselves for egoistic sakes. Yeah. What led you to come to the decision that you were like, I'm only going to help people who are impact driven? Because that's a big one to make at your age, considering the money you can make outside of that.
100%. And honestly, it's very simple to me. I think that there's actually more opportunity and more money to be made helping people that help people, and be focused on.
Why is that? Because I can't say, like, I agree with you because you have knowledge, but like, if I didn't know you, I would not agree with that.
Okay.
So that's an interesting thing. So why is that?
So, I mean,
why is it more profitable to work with people who are serving the light?
Because it's more sustainable, right?
Okay.
And so it's like,
How so?
I've had the opportunity to do $1 million deals and multiple $1 million deals with OnlyFans girls and different businesses that I didn't necessarily align with or feel resonant with.
You didn't want the OnlyFans bag, bro?
No, because here's the thought process is, I like to say I'm a Christian man before a businessman. Like, I believe that I'm building treasures for a life outside of just my fleshly body. And so I want to prioritize that. But even just in a logical, like, let's remove faith from the conversation and focus on just like logical, mechanical, my reputation is impacted by every single thing that I do and every single deal that I make. And the reality is the OnlyFans is not a business that's going to last, nor is it a business that people are proud of, right? And so it's like, I want to do business with people that are proud to be in business and that are building legacy businesses that even if, let's say, they have to step out, people's lives will be impacted by it. And so to me, it's more sustainable, right? Because I can build larger companies. I can build more impactful companies. I can work with more stimulating leaders. It's also more interesting to me because I could have more interesting conversations. Like, instead of looking at ass all day as a businessman, like, I get to actually have conversations about, like, I met a guy today that's opening a new restaurant downtown in Austin. And we're talking about the experience design and the atmosphere of this restaurant and the type of conversations the customers are going to have in the restaurant. That interests me way more. Or the surgeon I mentioned talking about non-operative techniques to help people recover. That interests me way more than talking about how can we get the bag from some guy in a chat room on a webcam.
Yeah. Morally, I hear what you're saying. Profitably, I'm not hearing you. Like, why is it more I'm not saying I'm not like, I don't care either way. I'm just saying that why is it more profitable to work? Because I hope it's the right answer.
Yes.
But why is it actually more profitable for you not to just go with a bunch of OnlyFans models? Like, why is it more profitable for you not to do that? So,
and this is also a clear distinction, is like, I've chosen to believe that it's more profitable for me to be in good and impact-driven business. I don't care if it's not. And so I just want to delineate, like, I have not done the exact math because I'm willfully ignorant on this because I'm choosing, I don't even want to entertain the thought process of being a OnlyFans manager or owning liquor stores because that's not something I'm interested in.
You could be the next Andrew Tate, bro.
You know what? Like, respectfully, I'm okay. I think he's an amazing guy. I think he's exactly what men need in today's world. I do think he's a beacon of hope for young men. And no, thank you. I'd rather be my own man. I'd rather be my own version. But so to answer the profitability thing, as I mentioned, like, the psyche has a light and a dark, right? And I do think it's, whichever side wins is the side that you feed. And I honestly believe that since I'm a God-fearing man and I have a faith that love conquers all. And I do believe that energy wins over a long enough period of time. And so I want to be on that team. And so it's like, even if I can make more money over here in the next 3 years, what happens when I get arrested for tax fraud? Or what happens when my reputation goes through the gutter? Or what happens when I can't get business in 10 years because I'm known as the Ron Jeremy of the internet, right? No, thank you.
It's such a pertinent conversation nowadays. I think that a lot of young men or women, actually both equally, will look at money just like, I want to get money as fast as possible in this moment, right? So it's like, I will do things just for that result without thinking of what you said, which is an important point, right? Like, I don't want that reputation. I want that sticky energy of being a sleazebag or not, which most of us don't have right now. Even followers, money, people our age, it's very much like, I want the $1 million followers, $1 million right now. However I get there morally doesn't matter, right? Do you agree with that statement? And how have you, like, what was the turning point for you? Like, to be like, you know what? I had the capacity intellectually to take that road, right? Just make money fast now with no idea of a consequence of my morality in the long run and my karma and my, God's wrath. So how did you come to the realization? How to, using from that reference point, how do other people, especially men and women our age, do the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still figuring it out. Like, I don't have, maybe an answer for everybody, but I'm just speaking from my own personal experience that, when I was a kid, I would sell substances to those around me, and I was definitely more interested in making money than how I made it, right? I was a lot more interested in just having money than where it came from. And so I was willing to do things that weren't in integrity with the man I wanted to be. And whether consciously or unconsciously, that made me super weak. It made me fragile, made me depressed. Like, I lived in a constant state of angst and like this weird, just shitty energy. Like, go into the woo-woo terms, it's like my vibration was lower. I was operating at a lower state of consciousness because I was just focused on how do I make money. And it ended up, I was making less money and my health was worse and my sleep was worse. And so then it's, let me actually pursue a purpose. Let me pursue a passion. And then the money just comes as a byproduct. And it's, to me, way more beneficial, way more sustainable, because I'm not just focused on making money. It's like, I'm strategic about how I make money. I'm not ignorant to it. Obviously, it's important to understand what the business mechanics is. And if your only priority is the money or the follows, I think you're setting yourself up.
In my experience, when you find the light and you operate from the light, it stops allowing you to go to the same level of darkness. In my experience, like, I'm trying to think of an example, some of it a little vulgar, but for example, let's use drugs and women, right?
Yeah.
I used to be a drug addict. I sold a little weed, just not for profit, just to be cool. But like, back in the day, I'd put any pill in front of me, I'd be like, woohoo, let's do it. Now there's no desire anymore, just because my consciousness won't let me. Like, the level of vibration I'm at, like, there's no resonance. Like, the frequency of a cocaine, Adderall, Molly, like, is not where I'm at. Not to say that anyone takes them is lesser than me, just my frequency, my consciousness isn't there. So I can't do it, right? If you take woman, right? There's a woman who's highly promiscuous, demonic in many ways, no judgment. Men can be the same thing in their way. Yes. I can't. I just, like, my even my evolutionary body will not let me. There's like this level of like, I cannot do this, right? Yeah. Why I say that is the answer I come to, branching off your idea, is that you have to find the light first. You have to purify yourself first, and then it follows. But if you're still at a level where you're operating off your shadow and you're unconscious and you have all these addictions feeding off you and these demonic entities attached to you, you're going to keep doing the same shit, right? So I think the question really is like how close are you to the light, and then go from there, right? Because you're still operating off your shadow and fear and anger and all this stuff. 100%. It's common with, where I can move the conversation to now, is that most entrepreneurs or people who desire success often come from deep wounding, deep shadows. And they don't know how to cultivate that into light. So what was let's go to that part of your story now. Like, what parts of your childhood and your upbringing created your desire to be a successful entrepreneur?
Yeah.
And were they more dark? And if they were, what were they? And how did you turn them to the light?
Yeah, I think, and I'll share a little bit about some of the experiences I had as a child, but there's really a key thing that I learned as a kid that has allowed me to actually improve and kind of set my life on a better path than it was before. And that's, if I repeat a mistake over and over, or get myself into the same situation, I haven't actually learned from it, right? And so it's like, I'm definitely a hard learner. I learn the hard way. I learn by making mistakes. And then I realized that if I'm repeating the same mistake, I'm not actually learning anything. And so it's like, when I hook up casually with someone that I'm not necessarily romantically or intimately interested in, and I feel that regret and that like, why the heck am I doing this? That's a lesson that's an opportunity to learn and change my behavior. If I go out and I black out drinking all night and then I wake up the next morning and I'm hungover for 2 days, that's an opportunity to learn and change the way I do things. If I spend all my money in the first week after I get paid and then I'm living on scraps for another week or I'm going into debt, that's an opportunity to learn. And so that to me is like, this is how I moved out of my shadow and into my light, is by running into a lot of walls and then going, wait a second, don't run into that wall again. And there was a lot of those lessons, right? Like
you have to feel the mark of the beast.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, you have to actually understand like the consequences. And so I think there's two approaches: either be smarter than I am and listen to someone else who tells you what the consequences are and avoid them, or, and kind of logically think about it, or run into the wall and then stop running into it. Like if you were to run in, like, let's say you're trying to walk out the door of this podcast studio and you kept on walking into the wall, like you'd be kind of an idiot after the first time or the second time. It's like, hey, just move over. So that's kind of how I look at life too, is just course correcting on my actions.
No, I agree. I think it's a controversial take that could land me in some hot water, just morally. But I do believe if you have a strong desire to do something unsavory beyond fucking harming someone,
yeah,
I would do it.
Mm.
Just because it's like, if you have a really strong fucking desire to do it,
yeah,
and there's like, you're like going crazy because you can't do it, it's like, as long as you're not killing yourself, it's like, if you want to pop a pill or some shit, you want to, go to the strip club, something like that. I'm not saying it's a good thing to do, but it's like, if you have your whole body, I need to do it, like you kind of have to do it to realize it doesn't mean anything, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm grateful I took all the drugs because I was like, my mom thankfully was so strict with me as a kid. Like, I come home, she'd check my eyes, smell my breath, and I'd be like, Mom, I didn't do it. And I was fucking doing a little bit. I was well behaved, right?
yeah,
But it got to a point where I was, in college, I was in a frat, and I was just like, drugs everywhere, and I was like, a part of me had to experience it. I was like, I fucking need to experience this shit. And it wasn't like, I had friends who never did drugs and their parents didn't do it, but they didn't have the same desire. My desire came from trauma, so I get why it happened, but like, I had to experience it to then be like, this is not for me,
yep,
right? And now I have literal zero fucking desire to do drugs, right? Same with going to a club and having sex with a promiscuous woman. Like, I did it. Nothing wrong.
yep,
I can't shame anyone who does it, but it's like, I did it. I realized it's not the thing for me, right? And now it happened. So it's like, it's tough because I don't want to make anyone go out and fucking pop Molly or some shit, but it's like,
no,
if you have an incredibly strong desire to do something and it's still there, to some level, you have to learn the mistake. And if you don't, then like, fair enough. But I agree with you.
I mean, I think like the better road is to have the self-control to not, and just understand.
It's tough though.
Yeah, it is. And I'm the same way as you. I'm a very impulsive person. And so it's like, I've had to, like do kind of the same thing where it's like, I go through the action or the behavior, and then I get to look at the behavior and actually take a moment to reflect and say, did that have any ROI in my life, or was that actually consequential?
Yeah, for example, with I used to be addicted to porn. It's fucked up, but I would start watching porn. I was like, I think 10 or 12, just start spamming it, and fucked up my brain. So it was like, my brain's wired to just be addicted to that shit. And about 2-3 years ago, I'd kind of stop. I'd do every now and then. And then the past year, I really haven't. And then I think in the summer, maybe at some point this year, I had this strong desire. I was like, fuck, I want to watch porn. And it was like the strong thing. I turned it on. I watched it. I did the bad act, but it was like, what I did is when I finished, I felt how fucking pissed off I was.
Wow.
How horrible it felt. I was like, well, I also saw like a demonic entity in the app. So that was another thing. But like, I felt in my body like, oh shit.
Why am I doing
this? I felt
this?
horrible. I felt like possessed. I felt just like, I felt it deeply. Like truly, I didn't ignore it. I felt it. I was like, oh, no, never, I have no desire again. Like I haven't even thought about it. It's like, oh, I can't. Right. So it's like, being hungover is the most beautiful example, right? Being hungover is literal, like exact feedback.
Yes.
Telling you like, you can't do this shit.
Biomechanical feedback that this is not something you should be doing.
You can't do this shit. Yeah.
You're intaking poison. And it's an interesting thing, right? Because it's, like, I think that a lot of it, I love that you're in a position where you just don't have the desire. And for me, it's like, I still want to get high every single day. I still want to, I was exposed to porn at about the same age. I think that I feel so bad for the children of this generation. Like the fact that we were exposed to porn at 10 years old blows me away, right? It's like that whole thing of like a modern man today can see more beautiful women in 10 minutes scrolling on an app than his grandpa saw in his whole life. That blows me away. And it really is like, for me, it's like, I still have all of those desires. Like I still have the desire to spend all of my money on stupid sweatshirts and, Gucci shoes, whatever, expensive trips. Like I still have all of these irresponsible desires. I've just learned that, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And I know like, even if I don't want to get up in the morning, I know I'm going to have a better day if I do. Even if I don't want to go to the gym, I'm going to have a better day if I do.
Yeah.
And so I've gotten to a space where I've had to learn that like actions have consequences, and what consequences do I want in my life? It's like,
I completely agree, but at the same time, it might serve you to just buy the Gucci shoes, put them on and be like, this makes no difference. Like there's power in that too, right? Like I agree with you.
It's true.
I think every man it's imperative for them to have deep discipline, but at the same time, like it's also useful to buy the Gucci shoes, put them on, like my fucking LV shoes. I put them on. I'm like, it's no difference, right?
Yes.
I wear them because I think I like them, but it's like I don't put them on thinking like, oh, I'm cool now. Like I used to. I put them on like I'm wearing new LV shoes. There's no girls running to me. Like, how the fuck is that happening? Like sometimes you just got to put the shoes on and be like, there's no fucking difference.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, because I think that's the whole thing of like, it's people are attracted to your inner work, not your outer work, right? It's like you're changing the paint on the house. You're not changing the house itself. And so it's like, I think when you do the inner work, the way you show up, the way you interact with others changes. And at that point, you can actually like express yourself differently and people connect with you differently. But the shoes, like whatever. But the other side of that is like, let's say you bought the shoes, but that was your rent money.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a situation where it's like,
different story.
Right. Or like, let's say you have the desire to sleep with the stripper and then you knock her up.
Yeah.
And you're a man with values that doesn't want to like, and that's the situation where it's like, okay, like, sure, am I attracted to her, whatever, like, do I want the shoes? Sure. But do I already have a commitment in a different way to this? Or is there like, that's something where I allocate all of my energy. I've learned this. I've learned to allocate my energy before, predetermine my energy. So it's like, what time do I wake up? And so then in the morning, I don't have to decide whether I'm getting out of bed or not, because I already decided. It's like, do I want to sleep with strippers or do I want to marry a good woman? A woman with values? Do I want to father children with a promiscuous woman or a more conservative woman? And my answer is a more conservative woman, a more traditional woman.
But to get to that answer,
yes,
you had to experience the opposite of that. Right?
For sure.
So it's like, I hear you, and it's one of those things I still haven't found the answer to. It's one of those philosophical arguments that like, I still don't know the answer to, right? The Buddhists, a lot of what I speak out and preach is tied to Buddhism, and one of the core concepts of Buddhism is to eliminate desire. And I completely disagree with that, right? But at the same time, it's like, if you only listen to desire, you're fucked. Especially as a man, you're screwed. So like, what's that middle ground? To me, what it's come to is that like, if you have that in your mind of the two habits, let's say the stripper, right? I hate to pick on the stripper, but it's like, hot stripper wants to bang you. And then there's like, you're thinking of like your Christian wife who's, been morally responsible. In that moment, it's like, can that image pull you away fully? And if not, and you're being here, and you really want to experience it, that's a tough moral argument. Is that like, is it better for me to not do it and always live fucking like anxious to experience it, or to experience it and feel the aftermath and be like, I cannot ever do this again? Where do you stand on that?
I think that's an individual thing, right? It's like, because exposure therapy is different for everybody. And so it's like, given my addictive personality, I know that continued exposure to anything reinforces the behavior. And so I just have to eliminate it. And so I'm like, just based on who I am as an individual, I just try to eliminate toxicity from my environment, because I already have enough inside of myself. Like I already have enough shit to work on just in process by myself. I don't need to be putting myself in environments where I'm exposed to more. Like if I have one drink, like let's say we go have old fashions, for the next 3 days, I'm going to want to drink all day long. Like, and so I just know that about myself. And so it's, if I have the one drink, I'm setting myself up to fail long term. And so it's like, for me, it's like just understanding that dynamic with myself. And everybody's different, right? Like you may be able to have the one drink and not think about it for 3 days.
No, I have the same wiring.
Okay.
But I've conquered it in some ways.
That's good. That's admirable.
So what's interesting about this exact wounding is that I think this pain that causes this habit is what makes you so good at what you do in some way. Like, do you ever feel that way? That I don't think we ever covered the initial question I asked a while ago, but it's like, what parts of your addictive personality or wounding do you think, or childhood, benefited the way you are as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. I mean, to go into the childhood trauma stuff, like I was exposed to a lot of addictive things very early on. Like I started smoking weed at 11 years old. I started vaping nicotine at
How'd that
11
come
years
about?
old.
Just to like fully, just a story. I want a story of that, and then I'll
Okay.
go back to this. I'll make sure I return. How the
Yeah.
fuck does 11-year-old smoke weed?
Yeah, so I went to a small arts, like I went to this small school in the middle of the mountains that was like focused on arts, like a liberal arts elementary school, 12 kids in my class, and I was the one that got bullied. And so I finally, the whole time I was there, I just wanted to go to the like big public school in our town, not this small little town, or not this small little school. And finally convinced my parents to take me to public school in 6th grade. And I met some kids in my class. And the summer of my 6th grade year, I was at the gym, and one of them was like, "Hey, come back to my house. I have something to show you." And so like me and 3 other people went to her house, and we smoked out of a pipe socket wrench. And at that point we found electronic hookahs. This is like before Juuls. And so this is like, can you imagine an 11-year-old walking into a smoke shop and buying
11's what, like 5th grade?
6th grade.
6th grade,
Yeah.
fucking hell.
And so and I had a bowl haircut. I looked like I was 9 years old. And I'd walk into, there was this one smoke shop, and there's one guy in the smoke shop that would sell us e-hookahs and pipes. And we're 11-year-old kids. We had a code word. We used to call it school supplies. So like if I was on the phone in the car with my parents, I'd be like, "Yeah, do you have any school supplies? Like, can I come over and smoke?" And I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I need to go get school supplies."
What was
from
it? Okay,
my
what was the
buddy's house."
first? What was the experience like? You first getting high when you were 11?
So it was summer of our 6th grade year. And we're in the backyard of my friend's house, and she had like a socket wrench with like a screen in it. And we literally smoked out of the edge of a socket. It was like a big 1/2-inch diameter socket wrench, and we smoked out of it. And I had a panic attack. Like I've always had tachycardia, which means like when you smoke, your heart rate jumps up. And that's the crazy part, is like even my first experience with weed was negative, overwhelmingly negative. And for some reason, I just kept on doing it. I think it was like this whole didn't fit in as a kid. I was getting bullied a lot. And so then I got an opportunity to fit in doing things that even I didn't align with. And then recently, to answer your question about like, how has this trauma impacted you, is I've realized like I'm addicted to a lot of things. Like I have a very addictive personality, and the root childhood trauma is belonging, like feeling a sense of belonging. And so I have 2 paths. I can belong inauthentically by doing things.
Why is that? Why did you make that deduction logically that your trauma comes from belonging, addiction wise?
Yeah, so that was, class of 12 kids, and I was always the one picked last or left out or jumped at recess or, so that was like, I would avoid going to recess because I knew I'd get the crap kicked out of me, and I would just solve math problems inside. And so that was like, I remember even as a tiny little kid, all I wanted to do was fit in, right? I was like, that was my thing.
So how did that drive the addiction? Was it like you ended up taking
the
drugs to like fit in with people that you thought were cool?
Exactly. So these kids are like, "Hey, come over to our house and then we're going to smoke." And I was like, "What?" And they're all smoking. And I remember sitting there like panic, because I was, I was raised on like, "Hey, don't smoke, be a good kid." And I remember like in my body, I still remember like this anxiety of like, I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be doing this. And they're like, "You want to hit?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So it's just one of those things where like I'm a product of my environment. And so I've just learned to put myself in better environments because I'm extremely susceptible to my environment. So
I think it's a common wound we all face. My story was, I don't know if you can relate, was I was the same way with weed, right? I actually was just, it made me super anxious. And I ended up smoking 1/2 ounce a week towards, towards when I was about 19 to 21. But why I did it was that I mixed it with drugs. That like I had to use it to fit in, right? And then the person I became with the drugs was what I perceived to be the only way I could fit in.
Yes.
Right. So the high version of me was the only way I could perceive that people would like me. Right. If I was a party, the drunk version of me was the only way that girls would like me. Right. So I became accustomed to presenting myself as the inebriated version of myself that could receive validation.
Yes.
I didn't believe that my authentic me could receive love.
Yes.
And then I was living a double life, and then that I think is what caused my depression. So can you relate to that in your experience?
I can actually exactly relate to that in terms of like, I got used to being the plug. Like I got used to being the guy that always had that gas on him. Right. And so that was like, oh, this is how I belong with people. And I started to realize over time that I found all of my validation in being that person that always had the plug for whatever someone needed. And then I started to realize that if
what did that feel like? Like, why is that validating to you for someone to be like, yo, I need fucking, what did you have? All the drugs?
Yeah.
I need an 8-ball and like an eighth of weed and some whatever pill. What made you feel like, ooh, this is nice for me?
Well, because it was a position of like feeling needed, right? Or being called upon, right? It was like, oh, I can actually be of value to this person.
Were you like scrawny and small?
Yeah. Well, I was like skinny fat.
I'm assuming it was like a interesting polarity of like who you were. Like you now are some like bad boy, right? That's like part of it. Like you were like kind of like all the kid with drugs, and that was different to the way you were originally perceived. This podcast sponsor is EONS. EONS uses a blend of adaptogenic mushrooms, nootropics, and biotechnology to help solve the issues of sleep, anxiety, gut health, and productivity. EONS is nature's technology. These here are the sleep gummies. Anyone I give these sleep gummies to falls asleep immediately and all their insomnia, sleep issues go away. Check out eons.com to get their supplements.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because it was like I was a calculus tutor and a drug dealer at the exact same time. And so there was such an extreme duality in my lifestyle of like people would come to me for math homework and Adderall at the same time, right? And so that was just kind of who I was, is I was known as this kid that was, you know, extremely intelligent and also had anything you needed. And so I was building this persona, I was building this armor around my true self of this is how I fit in, this is how I belong, this is how you can interact with me. It's like, if you need an answer or if you need, you know, a substance, I'm the guy to come to. And it honestly kind of hurt, right? Because you know that's not who you really are. It's like, I don't like answering I don't like doing people's homework for them, right? It's like, I like to walk someone through how to do their homework. I don't want to be the guy that people rely on to have something. Even in my business, I noticed that I built a business where my clients were extremely dependent on me. And I was noticing I'm doing the same thing as I was when I was selling drugs, is I'm creating a forced dependency with my relationships.
That's great because that makes you more money though.
It does, right? And that's like the world empowers this, right? The world, it's like we want to talk all about, you know, being better versions of ourselves and doing better business. And the reality is the economic model is benefited by this. It's like, if you can create forced dependency, it's better for your business. And so that's like, you know, going back to your point on like, is morality more profitable than immorality? You know, it's like, I refuse to even accept the fact that like I could take advantage of my clients and create forced dependency, because that's just not who I want to be. And so it's like, am I leaving money on the table? Sure. You know, it's like, but I'd rather just give it all away because that's not who I am. And I figured, you know, like it says, you know, you reap what you sow and you get what you give. And so I'm just like, I'm banking on the fact that that's true. I'm banking on the fact that what goes around comes around.
What was like the final straw in your experience where you're like, I can't keep following this path of both like the actual objective reality of being a drug addict, but also the subjective reality of not feeling like you could be yourself around people. So when did that shift, and then how did you start healing that? / have you even healed it?
Yeah, I think something to really be clear about myself is I believe that it's dangerous to consider myself healed. Like there's a big thing in like AA. I never went through AA, but I know there's a thing in AA, like the only important day is today. Like you just make the decision continually. And so I think that I will always be improving as a person, and then I should always be aware of my lessons that I've already learned as not to repeat them. And in this thought process of the work is never done. I'm always in a process of transformation. I'm never transformed, right? I'm always in a process of growing and healing. I'm never healed or grown. In this, I don't think that it's fair to draw a single final straw, right? Like there's been a lot of moments. One of my girlfriends, when I was 18 years old, I found out that she was cheating on me with one of my best friends. I left town. So I left town to go visit another friend. And my buddy called me the morning after I got to my buddy's house in North Dakota. And he calls me and he's like, dude, like I threw a party last night. Your girlfriend came over. We ended up hooking up. I feel really terrible. I just wanted you to know. And now I'm a 14-hour drive away. And I started to think about our relationship and where things went wrong. And I realized that I was the guy that would drive us to concerts. I was the guy that had the coke. I was the guy that had the weed. I was the one that had the plugs. And I was like, wait a second, like, when do we actually spend time together? And we were only spending time together when we're doing substances, like we're, on something or at a concert, or I was driving her somewhere. I was providing something to her. It wasn't necessarily that she just wanted to be around me. And so I was like, wait a second, like this is at fault on my own. I'm not going to blame her for that. And I was like, oh, like that was one of the big moments of, are the people around me because they care about me or just because of the value I provide the world? And then the big approach that I've had since that moment is, can I bring the value that I provide the world in closer alignment with who I actually am? Because I think that, it's unfair to expect people to love you unconditionally. Like, I do think you actually have to provide something to the world. Like, if you're not a baby or a puppy, it's kind of like, hey, do something with your life, right? It's just figuring out what to do with your life that's actually more congruent with your beliefs and your ideologies. That's kind of how I've taken it.
Why do you think that it's dangerous to believe you're healed?
Well, I think that's when we become ignorant again. I think that's like, even, in the Bible, it talks about like Jesus being tempted by Satan. And it's like, if Jesus is the literal Son of God, the perfect incarnation of a holy, devout man, and even he is being tempted by the devil, I think that's really dangerous, right? To assume that us as people with flaws and with our own shadow side, it's like, as soon as I believe that I no longer have a shadow is, I think, when the shadow has the most opportunity to strike, right? Because now I'm not even looking for the enemy. Now I'm not even vigilant. It's like, if you had let's say you built a castle and you're like, oh, well, our castle's, like you can't break into our castle. It's impossible to siege us. So we're just going to leave the gates down and we're not going to have any guards. It's like, I think that's where it gets dangerous for me.
I agree from like a zoomed out lens. I'll present you my take and we'll see what you think
please.
about it. I agree with you in the sense that, like, if we ignore our whole shadow, all our shit, and say it doesn't exist, that's incredibly dangerous and the easiest way for demonism to start attracting towards you. However, in my experience, for like I'd say that my shadow or my trauma consists of like 100 different data points.
Mm-hmm.
Of like shit that fucked up as a kid. That's like it probably is 100 data points, right?
Yeah. Minimum. Yeah.
I believe that once there's levels to it, right? There's awareness of it, right? You realize that the shadow becomes not shadow, because shadow is just part you can't see, right? So you start seeing it. It's an awareness, right? Then it becomes feeling of like, oh shit, like actually when you get triggered, being like feeling it, allowing it to release from your body. Where I think most people in the space get wrong is that they stay there. They'll be like, always feel it and all this shit. And like, it's useful at a point, but for me, it has to get to a point where you're like, I'm not doing this shit anymore.
Yes.
Or like, for example, one of my biggest triggers was because I was overweight, I had skin issues as a kid. I had zero riz, like no ability to get
zero riz.
no
okay.
ability, sorry. No ability to get girls at all.
Okay.
And although my mom was amazing in many ways, I didn't feel seen and loved by her in many ways. So I felt I was always chasing her validation. And then I could never get the validation of girls I wanted. So then I turned like 2019, became somewhat attractive. And then I get female attention, but there was the same wounded boy going about it.
Yeah.
So then I had to basically figure out like, okay, do I want, then it ruined my experience every time, right? They come in, I text them too much, hold on to them, then run away. And I'd be like, oh, what the fuck do I do? So I had to basically get to a point where I was like, in my last relationship, would keep fucking her up. And I was like, you know what? I felt this shit, I've been here.
Yes.
I'm not doing this shit anymore.
Yes.
Like, now when it comes, like, it really doesn't exist anymore. Like, for example, before if I'd ask a girl out and she didn't answer for like a couple hours, I'd be like, oh, what did I do wrong? I don't know, all this stuff. Like, that doesn't exist anymore.
Psychoanalyzing it.
I can see my mind going there a little bit. I'm like, I'm not doing this shit. Like,
it's because it's dangerous.
I'm just not doing this shit. So why I'm going back to the original argument is that I think, yes, it's really demonic to ignore and dangerous to ignore your shadow completely. But for specific data points out of the 100 or 1,000, you have to get to a point where you're like, I'm not doing this shit. Like,
that's true.
This shit is not driving me in the car anymore. Like, I felt it, I've experienced it, it's done.
Yes.
I'm not doing this shit anymore. So how does that resonate with you?
I think you're spot on, man. It's like making sure you're not making mountains out of molehills, right? And so it's like, for me, it's like, my big thing is like understanding I have an addictive personality and understanding that I'm extremely impulsive. Like, just those are like my two big things. And then I have 1,000 little data points. And so it's like, what is the data from all of those different data points that I have an addictive personality and that I'm impulsive? Okay, well, knowing these things, and then I'm also extremely emotional as a human being, it's like, well, let me be very careful on what I get obsessive about or addicted to. Let me make decisions and consciously process things. And can I sit with the feeling and not freak out about it? And so like, to me, it's like, I agree with you that if I just think about one specific instance over and over and I go through a thought loop, I start to spiral, right? Because I'm just thinking about the same thing over and over, feeling the same feeling. And so I'm on the same page. It's like, let me process this experience. Let me take what's in it for me and let me move forward with the information. It's like, okay. And then I can just be aware of like the underarching, the golden thread within it. You know, it's like, let me like, take what's in it for me and leave the rest.
So what are some of the positive addictions you have now? Like, where did you shift this wound to benefit your reality? Because I'm the same way, right? I'll be vulnerable in my situation first to see if it's similar to you. I'm as addictive truly as it gets. You know, I used to down a whole bottle and pop Xanax pills at the same time while I was smoking joints, while on mushrooms. So, and on Adderall. So it's like I was fucking in that shit. So for me, it's like, I realize I'm either addicted to literal shit or to like good stuff. So it's like, for example, now I'm like, fasting 24 hours, I eat fucking animal-based, you know, I'm a nice fast, I work out every day, like I've transferred there. So it's like, I realize that it is the way it is. I either put it there or not. So how has it been in your experience? So where are you shifting your addictions to in a healthy way? And can it ever, and once you answer that, I'd love for you to touch on, do you think it can be healthy to actually ever be addicted to anything? So. Yeah,
I mean, I think everything in moderation, including moderation. And I think any addiction can be toxic. Like if you are addicted to exercise, you're going to over-exercise and get injured. Or set yourself up to fail in the long term. But that is definitely like the things that I'm more obsessive about now is the cleanliness of my space. Because as I mentioned, I'm a product of my environment. Same thing with the quality of the people I surround myself with. And that leads into, you know, there's some shadow sides to that of judgmentalism and being very, you know, selective about the people I'm around. But a clean environment, a strong community, my health, I'm the same way as you. I am anal about the food that I put in my body, the water I put in my body, the exercise and movement. Like I don't miss a day on my steps or my movement. I have to do my push-ups and I have to do my walk every day because I know that these things are going to set me up long term. So yeah, like my own physical health, my community, my environment around me, those would really be the big things. And then the one that is kind of interesting that I've just picked up on recently, actually, when you asked this question, it came through for me, is self-control. I've gotten very like, I really don't like the feeling of things pulling on my mental energy anymore. It's like, I noticed that I went out a couple of weeks ago with some buddies here in Austin, and they're great guys. And I had a couple of drinks, and then I noticed that Sunday I got home from church and I looked at my liquor cabinet and it freaked me out. I was like, whoa, like what the fuck is this? Like get out of my head. And so I've noticed that like I'm becoming more and more, I find a lot of satisfaction in feeling like I have control over my own impulse. Like not necessarily my environment. I understand that most things around me I have no control over, but feeling controlled, like being able to walk in a bar and say no, or being around people that smoke weed and saying no, that makes me very satisfied.
Sammy, would you qualify yourself as a workaholic or no?
For sure.
Okay, how so?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's funny because I think that the big thing around an addiction is when you can never have enough, when you always want more. And so it's like, I'll work a 12-hour day, wake up the next day and feel like I didn't do any work. And it's like, and I'm productive too. I try to be very productive about my days. Like I don't try to, you know, I'm not the type of person to get lost in the weeds and go down some rabbit hole that
you're not doing
matter.
12 hours and 6 of those are on YouTube or, you know,
yeah, exactly.
Like fucking CNN or some shit.
Yeah, exactly. It's like when I'm working. And yet I feel like I could always be working more. But I've obviously committed to prioritizing my health and other things. So
let's unpack that. I have my own answer. Why do you think that is? I share it with you, right?
Yeah.
Even, for example, like I know that about me, even if I do a literal, you know, a whole day, like over the next 3 days, I think I'm shooting like fucking bunch of like 4 something podcasts to prepare for all of them. So I'm busy all the time. But even when it reaches Saturday, I'm going to be like, you know what? I could do more today. I could read this whole fucking philosophy book today. You know, so it's like, I'm with you. Why do you think that is? Why do you think it never can be enough for you?
Well, I think it's the pursuit of greatness and the pursuit of, I think every human is hardwired to pursue greatness in their own life.
Really?
Yeah. And I think that's what
how could that be if, I agree, but I think question for both, how could that be if if most people don't even fucking come close to it?
Well, I think that's a product of our environment. Like, I think that the overall culture and society around the whole world is conditioned for people not pursuing greatness and excellence. But also, like, especially in the capitalist world of like, everybody's definition and goalpost is different, right? And so it's like, I noticed that, at least to me, I'm learning that excellence to me is like being a good father and being attentive to my family, having attention to detail and being present with my wife, being a strong man in my community and a man of my word. And so I realized that, like, oh, my pursuit of greatness doesn't necessarily have anything to do with money, right? And so it's like when I'm traveling the world and I notice, like, in very extremely impoverished areas, I'll find men with extreme high levels of, and men and women that are extremely satisfied and present and seem like they're enjoying their life. It's like, because I think they're doing the things that fulfill their sense of purpose. So around the workaholism, I think that there's always things that we could be improving in terms of like going in the direction we want to go in. And so then it's just choosing to like, well, let me, align these obsessive qualities in my human behavior with the things that I actually want to pursue.
At what point, because I'm with you, and a question I ask myself constantly is that, at what point do I deserve a break? And is that even a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think you can increase leverage to a point where it's effortless for you to produce. But I don't think that, I think I have these two different thoughts of, I think the hustle culture is extremely toxic and dangerous. Like, I like to be very intentional with restoration. So it's like, if I'm going to take a day to go to the spa or go to the sauna or get a massage, or when I'm meditating and journaling, or sleeping, like, that is serious active recovery. And then, like, I can really, like, not think about anything when I'm dead, is kind of how I approach it. Yeah, I think that, the whole game is to get closer and closer into doing things that don't feel like work. So you don't feel like you have to take a break. And then it's just, well, I know that these recovery methods help me.
I hear you. I agree. Where I stand is that, right, if the metric is pursuing greatness, greatness to me isn't limited to external metrics, right? If greatness to you is just money, like you said, and women and fame, that's part of it. But I think greatness to you is also your internal state of being. And if you truly can't sit down by yourself in silence for 20 minutes, that is greatly inhibiting your ability to be great. I think that's a metric I use, right? Where it's like, is my need to work out of a genuine desire to progress, is it actually have to be doing? Or is it just because I can't sit still, right? Like, that's the metric I use. Like, can I not sit still, or should I actually be doing shit? And that's helped me personally.
That's a great way to look at it. You remind me of the quote by Marcus Aurelius, waste no more time arguing what a great man is, be one. And so this is like, again, like, I think the goalpost is different for everybody. So your measure is, am I doing this out of the need to stay busy, or am I doing this out of intentionality? And I think that goalpost for everybody listening is going to be completely different. And so to me, it's, as long as you're embodying that which you desire, right? And so for you, it's intentional action, focused action, instead of just doing things to feel busy, then you're achieving greatness. And it's your definition of greatness. And as long as you're doing that, fuck anybody that judges you, because you're doing the thing that matters.
Is your motivation solely limited to greatness, or what's like is there any shadow in your motivation that you still work or sitting with? Like, I personally have a desire to be famous, like that.
I do desire to be in better fitness than I already am and have a better physique than I have. And I do desire to build massive world-changing companies. Like, I do desire to have, accumulate large amounts of wealth and power. And all of those things, if they happen or not, is not 100% of my control. And so I'm, it's like, as long as I'm cool and I'm in control of my own mind, then it's like, okay, if all those things happen or not, fucking great. Or okay, whatever. Because I'm focused on controlling what I can. But I do. Yeah. Like, I want the Lamborghini for sure. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Because you own it. 'Cause a lot of people in this space don't. So fair enough. Same here. So in this path, I think of young men like us in the 20 to 25 range, or any man really. Or woman too, but woman's different because it's more so to do with beauty. But for men, what trap we can fall into is comparison, right? Like looking at the dude with the Lamborghini or the 1 million followers, all this money, and be like, why the fuck is my life not like that? And you get shameful and self-deprecating. How have you managed that? Because I think all men have to deal with that. If they haven't, they're ignoring something. Like how have you dealt with that reality of you comparing your path and trajectory to someone else, right? Like, what I personally deal with is I'll look at someone bigger in the space, and I'm at where I'm at, and I'm like, why am I not here? But then that person had to go through the same fucking process. Unless they got like a get rich quick scheme, then they did that. But how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? And that part of your male psyche being like, I'm not like this fucking top dude. Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I think especially with social media and just the internet, it's way easier, and we feed into it way more. Like women are comparing themselves on beauty and men are comparing themselves on success way more than we ever have. And so I would first say that I think it's completely okay to feel this level, in a way insecure. I feel it. I mean, I work in social media, so I'm exposed to this every single day. People that are doing better, that have more, whatever. It's like, and the crazy thing is like, and so I'll answer your question, but it's like the space is extremely dangerous and you're not wrong for feeling that way. In fact, I would argue everybody feels that way, or most people in today's world. It's just to what degree. So what I've found is like, okay, the comparison itself is natural. It's just, can you remind yourself that, hey, they're on a completely different journey, and can I compare myself to where I was? Like the fact that I was a drug addict and watching porn and just a general degenerate at 11 years old. And now I have 8 figures in client results, and I've built 6 and 7 figure businesses, and I've ran an Ironman, and I don't do drugs. Like if I can remember my own story and I can remember my own plot line, theirs gets way quieter, right? Because now I'm like, oh, fuck yeah. No, I'm doing the thing. Like I just have to remind myself of my own progress, really. It's like, if I remembered, hey, like 4 months ago, I couldn't walk. I had knee surgery, and now I'm sitting with my leg in a full flex. And I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, look how far I've come. And so that's, I think, like the antidote to comparison is.
Man, beautifully put. I hadn't thought about it that way. Just to summarize this, like when you're comparing yourself to someone else's who's bigger than you, switch that to comparing how much you progress in your own life.
Yes.
Like how you become big in your own way.
Yes.
Right. And it's always there. Like there's that quote that I always see, like, be grateful for the things that you used to pray for that are occurring now, right?
Yes.
And a lot of them are happening, but your mind, the way our minds operate is that it just can't be satisfied with the current reality. And so it's a good perspective. I hear you.
I love that you just brought up that quote of like, yeah, we're literally living the life that we used to pray for. And that's crazy to me. It's like we're constantly reaffirming our reality. And so like how I look at it is like when I come from a frame of, my mom calls it, originally from Dan Sullivan of Strategic Coach, the gap in the gain. And so it's like when you come from the gap of how much further you have to go or how much further ahead someone else is, it's really easy to feel shitty and just down about yourself and defeated, versus when you come from the gain, how far have you already come? How much progress have you already made? It inspires you and uplifts you. And when you come from the gain, when it's, Lucas has already accomplished A, B, and C. And what episode number will this be? Do you know?
60 something.
So the fact that you've already done 60 some episodes and you've been writing blogs for over 2 years, it's like when you come from that perspective of, oh my gosh, I've really come a long way. And like, look at how far I've come in this journey. Then when you suddenly measure to someone else in the space, it gives you context and you can say, well, what's he doing that I could implement? Or what's he doing better than me that I could work on? But outside of that, you already are coming from a foundation of, I'm already doing the things. Like you're no longer coming from a place of, oh, I'm a fuck up and he's so much further ahead. It's, well, what can I learn from him? Like the big thing in my fitness journey, right? It's like when I was 18 years old, I couldn't run a mile or do 1 pull-up. I remember I got a pull-up bar when I was 18 years old trying to get sober, and I couldn't do a pull-up, bro. And now I can do like 6 in a row. And so then I look at someone else who can do 20 in a row. And if I just look at them and I just see him doing the pull-ups, I feel like shit. I'm like, damn, he's so much stronger than me. Oh my gosh. And then I remind myself, I couldn't even do 1 pull-up. And now I can do 6. And there was a point where I could do 12.
Yeah.
Like
adding to that conversation to make it a little more to do with the inner side of things. Because I think if you just base it on external ways, which is useful in some ways, but like in my experience, or any entrepreneur can tell you, your experience too, like you can have times like this and then all of a sudden you go fucking here, right? So you're only using the external validation, like, oh fuck, like for example, like I recently had the worst Instagram engagement I had since I was like 19, right? Wow. And that for some reason, I think I called it in to learn, but it was like, Okay, I could look at that in a moment being like, holy shit, what the fuck? Like, I'm even way further back than I used to be, like, I'm fucked. Or my mind goes in that moment to have different layers that, like, I'm reacting to it. I don't even give a fuck, right? Like, in the past, I would have reacted to that and be like, oh shit, I'm worthless, I'm not cool, like, no one's gonna like me, I can't succeed. But now it just doesn't, it just is. It's just, oh, okay, whatever, right? So I think the metric could also be like how far you've internally come,
Yes.
right? And the metric I use for that is like how things that used to trigger you don't even phase you anymore, right?
Yeah.
If things that used to like really fuck with you, for example, me getting like likes and comments, like if that isn't affecting me, it's like, okay, that's how far I've come, right? So it's a combination of things, but there is an external truth, right? And in how hard you worked and certain accomplishments, but there's also the truth of how far you come internally. That your ability to be centered amidst the chaos of life is better. I think that's the most important metric actually, 100%. Is your internal state.
Yes. And I think that's actually the golden thread of this whole conversation that we've had so far is like, if you have the ability to sit in the desire or to sit in the response or the environment or the trigger and just allow it to be without being disturbed by it, you win. Like that's like the whole ethos of stoicism, right? And something that I've really embedded in my own life is like, okay, like regardless of where I'm at, well, how can I actually be inside? Like, can I find peace in the fact that I am where I am? And that's all that really matters. I think you bring up an exceptional point. And it's actually, I think, the social media thing is the perfect litmus test because it's the perfect encapsulation of ego. It's like, oh, well, my post didn't get the engagement I wanted it to. It's like, what can I learn from this? What can I do better? Why did this happen? Instead of being like, oh my God, everybody hates me. It's like,
branching off your point, I think that it's the most useful skill anyone could have, truly, is to just not, when people say we have a fear of something external manifesting, it's never the external thing, right? I have a fear of someone saying no to an ask a day. I have a fear of getting fired or a fear of someone dying. It's not the thing, it's your fear of feeling the emotion that comes with it, right? That's the experience. Like, it's just, all our fears come down to not wanting to feel a certain emotion. The fear itself is not sitting with a certain feeling, right? So now I'm in a place, thankfully, through my life experience, my hardship, being like, I could feel anything and it's whatever. Truly. It's like, the worst feeling can come, I know I can feel it and not be, and my psyche will be phased. I may feel it and be intense, my body, my identity won't shift. That, to me, is the most powerful place to be, is to not be afraid of any feeling.
I think that's self-mastery. It's understanding that I don't need to hide from these feelings. I don't need to suppress these feelings or numb them. I can just allow them to be.
What's the hardest feeling for you to feel?
That's a really great question.
We all have one.
Yeah, I think I need to think on that. Yeah.
Well, let's try and find an answer. The question I'd ask if I were not coaching, if I were coaching, would be like, what trigger has been the thing that's made you want to avoid it the most? Like, what feeling makes you want to take a drink or do something nefarious?
That's a really great question. And it's this, again, going back to my childhood, it's this thing about belonging. And so it's like, I think that being let down by people or being like forgotten about would really be the thing, is like being forgotten.
What's an example of that you recently faced?
Oh, recently. Ooh,
or the last one you could think of. It could be just a good example so people can understand what the situation is.
I guess like the one that came to mind is like when my sister and I were kids, my parents would help my sister with her homework and they would just leave me to do my own homework because they figured I'd have it under control. And I remember feeling upset about that, not because I needed help on my homework, but because, they're all sitting in the kitchen working on their homework and I'm sitting in my bedroom.
You feel abandoned, underappreciated.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So that's definitely something that comes up. But yeah, I mean.
In what situations does it come up? Like if someone, like friends don't invite you to a party, if you at a place where you think people are cool and you feel like they don't like you, like in what ways does it manifest for you?
Yeah, I mean, so what I've noticed is that I've become very capable of, where it comes up for me is especially highlighting intimate relationships, really definitely in intimate relationships. And then anything where I actually have something on the line. And so like I can have social interactions with people and not be affected by them at all, no matter what they think of me, until there's genuine stakes on the table. And so it's like, if we're in an intimate relationship or if we have any kind of commitment to each other, that's when I actually start to feel an effect. Is like, if if I'm going to let you down in a serious way, in a serious relationship, whether it's a brotherhood or an intimate relationship with a woman, that's where things get crazy for me, is like when the stakes are high, right? Like, let's say it's a business venture. Like if I'm in business with someone or a client, those are the people I get freaked out about, or a girlfriend.
Freaked out in what context? Like, what is it reduced to? Like letting them down? What's the key thing that upsets you?
Yeah, I think it's them me letting them down, or them picking someone else.
Okay.
Right. And
picking
so
someone else.
Yeah.
That picking your sister, that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So that would be, I think it's either them like me not being good enough for them, or them deciding to pick someone else. Like those two things trigger the shit out of me.
For me, what my mind goes to is that, like, if you get to a place where you can experience that feeling and not have it completely ruin your sense of identity, you're going to stop fearing it in a way.
100%.
You know? And so it's like it's a corny statement, but it is true that just the fear goes away when you just start to feel it. We're just like, okay, at a worst is a sensation on my body, right? There's levels to it, right? It's like you let the sensation then dictate your psyche, right? Your thoughts are a reflective feeling, which makes it's like self-attacking. But the thoughts are only existing because you're resisting the sensation, right? The thoughts, if you allow the thoughts to run rampant in reflection of the sensation, it's just resistance. It's like you're resisting the feeling, and you're like, and you're spiraling all this shit. If you just go down your body, you're like, okay. For anyone that's not pick on you, for me too, it's like, that's what I go to whenever I'm triggered, is that like I just sit, I'm like, okay, I can feel this. I can be with this. Yes. And then it's like, I can also feel this and do shit at the same time. I can be in the world and feel this and be okay. Yeah. That's also another metric. It's like, can I still be a useful human being in this world and feel this shit? I
just want to echo that is, I think, the essentialism of all of it. And it's not an overnight process. Like, I've been feeling these emotions for years and processing them, and I've just gotten better and more responsive. It's like, it's still a process. Like, I figured this shit out in terms of like, oh, I have this trauma to heal a long time ago. And now it's just a process of, like uncovering what I can and moving on.
To hit one last topic before we wrap up.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about is, let's try and, I think right now, especially for men our age, and women too, in a different way, is it's increasingly easy to lose your mind because of social media and technology.
Yes.
So what's a blueprint that you recommend for people our age who are pursuing something in social media, to not lose their center and to go insane? Like, what do you think are the core traps we face as Gen Zers in this space that can cause us mental deterioration?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I'm really happy we're hitting on this, and I think this is to kind of tie a bow on it. I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant. Is that okay?
That's what you're here to do.
Beautiful. So I think we're in 6-dimensional warfare, psychological warfare at this point. And so like, this is the point of history where there are corporations and entities that their direct incentive is to change the way you see yourself. Right. And like, that's the whole thing of marketing and psychology, is like, if I can convince you that you need to buy my thing to feel good about yourself, you'll buy my thing. Right. And so we're in a day and age where it's psychological warfare, it's identity warfare. And so this is like, I could recommend a morning routine or a habit or a ritual or a phone protocol, but none of those things really matter. At the end of the day, what the root of all those things is being in control of your own self-identity. And so it's like, well, okay, what does this actually look like? It means having an understanding of who you really are, both your strengths and weaknesses, who you want to become, both your strengths and weaknesses, and what that reality looks like, and then taking actions congruent with that person. It's like, I think that, again, the goalpost is different for everybody, but it's like learning to deprogram your mind and noticing that, like, oh, every time I go to the bathroom, I feel an impulse to pull out my phone. Can I retrain that? Can I set my phone down? Oh, every time I lie down in my bed, I feel an impulse to pull out my phone. Can I retrain that and make my bed the no phone zone where I'm not allowed to be on my phone in bed? It's like, can I create these boundaries with myself based on my own behavior? And I think that's different for everybody. It's like, everybody's going to have their own things, but it's like, I've just started to recognize that, like, capitalism and technology and artificial intelligence and social media, they're all tools, right? And so all these different things, it's like, we can use them to benefit us, right? We can use social media to interact with more people at a larger scale, more decentralized scale than ever before. We can use the internet to find information that we would have never had access to. We can use AI to increase the leverage of our productivity like never before. These things are fucking awesome tools. And when we let them consume us and we let AI tell us what to do with our lives or come up with ideas for us, and when we use social media to just compare ourselves to other people and live alternate realities through a screen, it's like, if I'm jacking off to some other dude having sex with the girl that I want to have sex with, that is creating an alternate reality that I'm living in, right? I'm pleasuring myself to someone else's reality instead of saying, whoa, I want to be in control of my mind. Let me put the phone down. Who do I have to become to actually live that reality, right? Like, do I need to have a healthy body, a healthy mind? Do I need to be successful? Do I need to be confident around women, right? Let me create that reality so I can actually live the reality I want instead of being able to just pull out my phone and live 30 different realities at once. So like, I mean, the overall principle of everything is like, stop scrolling. I think the biggest thing is like, the only time I'm using my phone to scroll, and I do still have a problem, like sometimes I'll fall back into the shadow behavior, but the only time I really use my phone to scroll is when I'm doing research. When I'm searching something, I have a timer. It's like, I'm going to create as much safety as possible. I'm going to be out of bed, you know, in a productive and focused environment. I'm going to use my computer instead of my phone, and I'm going to like have a timer on, and I'm going to be searching certain keywords with an outcome, and I'm going to be moving a piece of content into a document. And so now I have a safety net of like, I can't get lost in this trap of comparison. I'm doing it professionally. You know, I'm analyzing content. I'm studying something. But that's like, I think that the big thing right now is we're fighting psychological warfare we're in a war of our own mind. It's like, either you're going to let Pfizer and these giant companies, like you're going to let these giant investment companies and mutual fund or hedge funds and these giant pharmaceutical companies and food companies like Coca-Cola and all these commercialized industries convince you what you are and are not, or you're going to deprogram yourself and decide what you are and are not. That was a big rant, but this is really like the whole thing is like, for our generations, like, understand that these are tools and you can use it, you can pick it up and use it, but also understand that it's already being used against you. Like, these things are actively being deployed against you. Like, people that think TikTok is a lot of fun to scroll and they don't realize that it's tracking your location and it's tracking what other apps do you use and how much time do you spend on all these apps on your phone and what are you engaging with and listening to you. I'm like, you don't understand that these things are being weaponized against you. Like,
it's a mic drop moment for you, bro. I don't have a mic.
Yeah.
You should drop it right now, but it's I don't want to add anything to it just because what you said is so good, but just to put my spiel on it and put a spiritual take on it is that, in my experience, to find myself, I had to get rid of everything I was not, right? And then you eventually come to a place where you're nothing. And that sounds morbid and nihilistic, but it's like, all you are is a connection to divinity in my eyes. Like, you're just a piece of light, unless like you're NPC or AI or something. And then, but like, all you are is a connection to light, right? So, and why I say that, to relate back to you, is that social media, especially social media and advertisements and TV and all these things, like, they make the ego increasingly loud in volume. So you get further more entrenched into the I am XYZ, I am all these things, labels, and believing all these things, having attachments to all these different dramas and celebrities and influencers. You follow foreign influencers and you're keeping up with them all. That's all further and further away from your center of just being nothing. It's just a connection to divinity. So it's why I say that is that, like, I'm not shaming you do all these things, but always remember that, like, you are none of these things.
yes.
You are none of these things. You are not the drama. You're not the famous person. You are just a divine piece of light experiencing yourself being a human being. And that can be part of the experience, but it's not experiencing it if you're like attached to it all the time, if you're like always stuck in it and all these rat races. So the message I can say is, like, you're not going to find yourself through scrolling on social media and posting and getting likes and validation. You're going to find yourself by finding your core. And that only involves removing everything you're not. So, you know.
I completely agree with you. This is, it's the journey of self-discovery. And that's, in my experience, it's like learning how to control yourself and learning how to release anything that controls you. And so it's like, yeah, to your point, it's like, I can appreciate a good football game. I can appreciate a good soccer game. And if the outcome of that game has an emotional, psychological response that I didn't choose or opt into, that's
such a good example. I think about it, and it's gonna offend some people, but I really don't care. Is it like, if your happiness depends on the fucking Lakers winning or losing,
holy shit,
you are not living a good life.
No, it's depressing to me.
Yeah,
I have friends who will have the best day or the worst day of their whole month depending on who wins a game, and I'm like, you're not even on the fucking field, dude.
Yeah.
Like, you're not their coach, you're not their strategist, like, you're not even in the locker room. Like, you are doing nothing. Not a single thing that you do impacts the outcome of that game. And yet the outcome of that game impacts your entire psychosocial and emotional like what?
But going back to what I said earlier, just briefly, it's the attachment to the identity of it, right? Like,
Yes.
I am a Laker, right? And if you are a Laker, then your whole reality depends on the success of the Lakers. So just removing those things. I mean, like, the more you remove that because that applies to every single level of your life, right? So.
And then it's just like choosing to identify with the things that you are. It's like, I am self-controlled. I am athletic. I am extremely selective in who I spend time with. And these are things that I actually have control over. Like, I'm always oriented towards growth, or I am always focused on learning. Now, suddenly I've created, instead of I'm a Lakers fan and I am a Lakers, I'm now someone that's just focused on being me.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I'm going to end it there, and thank you for both simultaneously giving us practical wisdom to increase our social media engagement and ability to be there, but also like how to deal with the negative sides of it, which is what my intention was in this. I think we did a decent job in executing that. So thank you. And just want to shout out anything you're working on, your pages for people to find you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I do appreciate your time. And it's fun to explore like the actual tactical applications of social media, and then the philosophical self-identity and how that interacts with each other. For anybody listening, you can find me on Instagram, the Harrison Coley. Literally just the Harrison Coley, no spaces, no capitals, no underscores, the Harrison Coley on Instagram. Best way to get in touch with me. And thank you again for having me.
Of course, man. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to watch more content, please click this video right here, and don't forget to subscribe right here. Thank you.